What is up, you guys? This is JP coming at you with another video. Today's video was spawned by one of my subscribers on my last live stream. I can't remember his YouTube name exactly. I think his YouTube name was, the last name he had on there was Zimmerman. You guys can check out the live stream and see what I'm talking about. But he was specifically asking me about the best rep ranges for hypertrophy. So the best rep ranges to get jacked. I'm gonna answer this question in a 3-part series. I'm gonna go over the 1 to 6 rep ranges or the heavy work, the 7 to 15 rep range, the moderately heavy work, and then the 16 plus rep range. So all the very high rep, lighter weight work. Today's video is going to be about the lower rep ranges, the heavier rep ranges, the 1 to 6 rep range. So typically the heavier work. But before I get into that, I'm going to preface this by telling you the 2 things that you need to induce hypertrophy. So you need 2 things to cause yourself to get jacked. One is you need sufficient enough intensity. So you need to lift a heavy enough weight in regards to the percentage of 1 rep max for you. So if you need it, it needs to be heavy enough. Now, the other form of intensity is intensity of effort. You need to be relatively close to failure. If you're too far from failure, again, that's not sufficient enough, it's not intense enough, and you may induce very little or no hypertrophy. You're not going to be forcing your body to want to develop more muscle to get more jacked. So you need sufficient enough intensity on both fronts. The second thing is you need enough of that stimulus. So it's not enough to just lift heavy. If you were to lift up a heavy dumbbell for a curl, and you were to lift it 1 inch, 1 rep, just do 1 inch, 1 rep, and then drop it and say, oh, it's heavy. Even if it was a heavy dumbbell, that's not enough. You have to do enough range of motion and enough reps and sets to induce hypertrophy for you. So those are the 2 things you need for hypertrophy. So knowing that, you can induce hypertrophy in any rep range. The lower rep ranges, the middle rep ranges, and the heavier and the high rep ranges. There is no rep range for hypertrophy. All rep ranges can do this. And there was a study by Brad Schoenfeld, I hope I'm remembering that right, I think it was by Brad Schoenfeld, that actually showed this, that he had 2 groups. One group do the lower rep ranges, heavier work, typically like a powerlifting style training, and then another group do a bodybuilding style training, that middle rep range, that kind of middle rep range work. So and then what do you know, when they matched a volume load is reps times sets times weight, both groups gained the same amount of muscle, but the group training like a powerlifter actually got stronger due to the principle of specificity. But again, they both, when you matched for volume load, they gain the same amount of muscle. So so that basically shows right there that there's no hypertrophy rep range. But there was one caveat to that study, was that to match volume load, the powerlifters, because they were doing such few reps, they had to do a lot more sets than the bodybuilding group. The bodybuilding group didn't have to do that many sets because, again, volume load is reps times sets times weight. The bodybuilding group was doing more reps per set, so that got volume load accumulated up a lot. Their volume was just building up a lot. So to keep up, the powerlifting group, they had to do a lot more sets. So take note of that for later. So now let's get into the beginning rep ranges, the 1 to 6 rep range, or the heavy work. The pros of this rep range for hypertrophy. The first pro for this rep range is that when you work in this rep range, you are going to get stronger. Due to the principle of specificity, you need to, if you want to get stronger, you need to train with heavier weights. So if you're training in this rep range, you are going to get the strongest. When you get stronger, you can lift more weights sub-maximally. So if your 3 rep max and your 5 rep max goes up, your 8 to 12 rep range weights are also going to go up, and more than likely, and then obviously as you go down the chain, you're going to be able to lift more heavier, lighter weights, if you get what I'm saying. So whatever you used for your 4 to 16 rep range or 8 to 12 rep range is most likely going to go up if your 3 rep max and your 5 rep max goes up. So that means that you're going to be able to accumulate more volume over time. So if you've noticed that, like for example, if your 3 rep max and your bench press goes up because you're training in the lower rep ranges, your 8 to 12, when you go to your 8 to 12 rep range for your bench press, you're probably going to be able to use heavier weights on the 8 to 12 rep range as well, which means more volume. So that's one pro of strength work. The second pro is, who the fuck doesn't like to be stronger? Everyone likes to be stronger. That's definitely a pro. I've never met anyone in my life that said that if it's not going to mess up my gains, even if you're talking about a bodybuilder or someone who wants to get jacked primarily, I've never met anyone in my life who says, I don't want to get stronger if it's not going to mess with my gains and getting jacked. I've never met anyone in my life, so that's a pro. Now, the cons of the lower rep ranges. The cons of the lower rep ranges, and this is where I told you to take note of earlier of the study, is that if you're someone specifically, remember we're talking about hypertrophy here, so mainly, so the rep ranges in regards to hypertrophy. So for the lower rep ranges, if your main goal is hypertrophy, even though you can, in the study I talked about, even though you can gain muscle in any rep range, there's no hypertrophy rep range. If you primarily do most of your work in the lower rep ranges with heavier weights, to match a volume load or to get as much volume load as you can to, again, maximize the hypertrophic response, you are going to need to do more sets to be able to keep that volume load high or volume high, as was shown in that study. They had to match a volume load, and then when they did, they both gained the same amount of muscle. But the con of that is, just like it showed in the study too, because the subjects did say this, that is very tasking. When most of your work is done, when you do a lot of sets, like bodybuilders would do, but a lot of sets, but those sets are done in those lower rep ranges with heavier weight, you are going to get burnt out. Joints wise, you are going to get burnt out. Mentally, it is just very tasking. It's going to be harder to recover. It's not very efficient to accumulate volume. So this rep range, it's not efficient to accumulate volume. So again, just like the study said, those powerlifting style people had to do a lot more sets. So to keep up with the volume of the bodybuilder group, because if they didn't match it, it wouldn't have been a good study. So even though you can accumulate volume in this rep range, for you to get a lot of volume, you have to do a lot of sets, because you can do a lot of reps. We're talking about the lower rep ranges. So you got to do a lot of sets, and a lot of sets of heavier weight is just not smart, especially if you're someone whose main goal is hypertrophy, like we're talking about. Your main goal is like get jacked. You don't want to be in that kind of turtle race against someone who's in the higher rep ranges. So that is the biggest con of the lower rep ranges, is that even though you can gain muscle fine in this rep range, it's just very hard to kind of build volume over time in this rep range, and it's not that efficient. And again, I don't recommend stacking all your sets in this lower rep range area. I recommend, a little bit of your program be devoted to these lower rep ranges if your main goal is hypertrophy, but not all of it. Maybe like 25-30% of it should be in these lower rep ranges. So that's one con. A second and that's a huge con. So don't take note of that. It's a very big con. So the second con of this is that obviously if you're doing this type of training, if you're trying to do most of your work in the lower rep ranges as a bodybuilder, you're going to be in the gym a lot longer, because again, heavier weight, strength-based sets, require longer rest periods. Plain and simple. If you're not getting the best out of the sets, and it's pretty straightforward with that. So you're going to be working out a lot longer. So those are the pros of the lower rep ranges. You get stronger, you can lift more weight submaximally, which means you get more volume over time, which means that, good for getting jacked. But so that's a pro, that's the main pro. There was another pro there, but that was the main pro. The main con is that it's not as efficient to be able to do most of your work in these lower rep ranges. So for someone who's trying to get jacked or their main goal is hypertrophy, I recommend you devote some of your sets to heavier work, but not a lot, just like 25 to 30%. And that's definitely more than enough, because we know that strength responds to peak intensity, not average intensity. So as long as you have 2-3 sets devoted to heavy work for, like, let's just say you do 2 sets on bench press heavier, two sets of 5 or something, and then the rest of your bench press or pressing is in the higher rep ranges because you're trying to accumulate volume, that's more than enough. That's fine. So again, you don't want too much of your work to be in that 1 to 6 rep range because of the cons that I said, but you do want some of it because of the pros that I said. It's kind of like a balancing act. The next video, I'm gonna go over the 7 to 15 rep range. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.